Hello, Jared the Wyrd-Worker here. In this video, I'd like to offer a tentative explanation of the origins of pagan deities. To start out, I'd like to state clearly that this is a highly speculative bit of theology I'm going to be addressing today, and there are other views within the broad range of pagan belief and practice. So as you watch, keep in mind, as always, that I'm neither the pagan pope nor the supreme witch commander. Thank the gods for that. I know I do. I think one important thing to note is that I and many others believe the deities came into existence. That is, unlike some other religions and theologies, we don't believe that our deities always existed. In fact, the Norse myths suggest that there were other beings that existed before the Aesir and presumably the Vanir. My personal view is that my deities did not even start out as deities. Most of them, I suspect, started out as ordinary human beings who actually existed. However, the historical information about those humans have faded from memory and have since been replaced by the myths of the gods they eventually became. As an aside, Ivan Abero suggests a similar yet slightly different explanation in their video on polytheism. Ivan suggests that deities started out as spirits of a place, like a sacred site or a spring or something like that, who then grew to be deities. I highly recommend you check out Ivan's video at some point, and we'll be putting a card up for it on this video. Just be sure you finish watching this video too, okay? Also, if you find this topic interesting and appreciate this video, please consider hitting that like button down below. So how does a human being become a deity? Well, I think it takes time and myth making. For whatever reason, that person was unique and stuck out in people's minds. Perhaps they were a community leader or religious figure of some sort. They gathered a following, and legends started growing up around them. They became larger than life in the minds of their followers. Even after their death, their legend grew and people continued to honor them. Perhaps they even began to worship them. At some point, that historical human becomes consumed almost entirely by the legends and myth-making surrounding them. They began to be seen as a supernatural, perhaps living on in some sense. Now, some people may see this as raising the question, does that mean that deities are not real? I suppose that depends on what your belief about what real means in this context. Personally, I think there is a certain power in such figures as a cultural symbol and an expression of Jungian archetypes, and I certainly know witches who see the deities as nothing more than this. Personally, however, I think, though I'll never be able to objectively prove this to other people and don't require anyone to share my opinion, that it's possible for something more real to take on a life of its own and become distinct from those symbols and archetypes as well. So in that sense, I think that the myth-making and veneration of these mythic figures can make them real in a way that we don't fully understand right now. Personally, what interests me more than that question is the implications that the deities came into existence over time. Imagine what it must be like to suddenly find yourself elevated to godhood. Do you get an instruction manual when that happens? Is there some sort of deity mentoring program for new deities? Or you just have to try to figure things out as you go along? I imagine there must be a learning process involved, which I think is great. It's one of the reasons I'm opposed to authoritarian religion and unquestioned obedience to any deity. They may have gathered some wisdom and power, but they're ultimately still learning and are capable of making mistakes. The idea that we have created the deities by our myth-making and veneration of them also suggests that the deities owe their very existence to us. Perhaps they continue to need our veneration and myth-making to maintain their existence, as Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett each hinted at in their respective books, American Gods and Small Gods. According to one of my past mentors, this is reflected by certain interpretations of the myth about Persephone and Hades. In those interpretations, the gods' big complaint with Demeter's decision to plunge the world into barren coldness is that it meant that the humans could no longer grow crops, and those crops were necessary for humans to make the sacrifices to keep the gods in power and alive. This ties back to something I said in my live stream that I did recently on the topic of pagan deities. I'll put a card up for the playback of that stream. I mentioned that the deities need us, if not for their very existence, then in creating the better world that they want, or seem to want, in my experience, for humans. The fact that we created them and they're still learning their role in this world really reinforces the idea that we can be in partnership with the deities rather than their obedient servants. Hopefully this video has given you a few insights into how I believe my deities came into existence and the implications of those beliefs. I'd love to hear your own thoughts on the topic, so feel free and encouraged to leave a comment below. Until next time, blessed be.